My name is Susan Miller. Before my life was cleaved in two, the before, and the after. It was a Tuesday morning, September 14th. I remember the date because the mums I'd just planted were finally starting to open, their rusty orange petals catching the early autumn light. My little house in Westerville, Ohio was quiet, filled with the hum of the refrigerator and the gentle drip of the watering can as I tended to my African violets. It was the same quiet I'd lived in for 5 years, ever since my husband, Tom, passed away. A predictable, peaceful quiet that I had mistaken for safety. That's when the knock came. It wasn't the friendly rap of my neighbor Carol or the thud of a UPS package being dropped. It was a sound I'd only ever heard in movies. 3 sharp, authoritative knocks that didn't ask for entry so much as demand it. I set the watering can down, wiping my damp hands on my jeans. Through the peephole I saw 2 figures, both men, both wearing dark, nondescript suits that seemed too formal for a Tuesday morning in our neighborhood. I opened the door. The taller of the 2, a man with tired eyes and a jaw that looked like it was permanently clenched, held up a leather wallet, flipping it open to a badge. "Susan Miller?" he asked. His voice was flat, without warmth or curiosity. "Yes, that's me. I'm Special Agent Riley. This is Special Agent Davies," he said, gesturing to the other man. "FBI, may we come in for a moment? We have a few questions." The letters FBI seemed to hang in the air between us, foreign and absurd. It was like they were speaking a different language. Is this about some kind of scam? I get those calls all the time, about my Social Security. "No, ma'am," Agent Riley cut me off. "This isn't about a phone scam. This is about a wire transfer originating from your account on March 22nd of this year." I felt a dizzying wave of relief, followed immediately by confusion. "My son," I said, a nervous laugh escaping my lips. "Oh my goodness, you had me scared to death." "That was for my son, Mark, for his first house. Is there a problem with the bank?" "We can discuss it inside, ma'am," Agent Davies said, his voice a little softer than his partner's. I stepped back, letting them into the living room Tom and I had spent 30 years furnishing. They didn't look at the family photos on the mantel or the Afghan I'd knitted on the back of the couch. Their eyes scanned the room with a professional emptiness that made my skin crawl. I sat on the edge of the floral sofa. They remained standing, towering over me. "Mrs. Miller," Agent Riley began, pulling a small notepad from his jacket. "On March 22nd, did you authorize a transfer from your personal savings account in the amount of $250,000? "Yes, of course," I said. "Every penny. It was my life savings, a gift for my son and his fiancée. With the housing market the way it is, they needed it for a strong down payment." I felt a swell of maternal pride saying it, the words a shield against the fear coiling in my stomach. Agent Riley just looked at me. "And where did you believe this money was going?" "To an escrow account for the house," I said, though even as the words left my mouth they felt flimsy. Mark had it all set up through his financial advisor. He scribbled a note. The recipient of the wire was not an escrow company, Ma's Am. The recipient was an LLC registered in Delaware under the name Stature Holdings Group. Are you familiar with that name? Stature Holdings. I repeated the words, tasting them. They were like ash in my mouth. Yes, that was it. Mark said it was a real estate holding company for tax purposes, I think. Why did my voice sound so small? Why was I asking instead of telling? "And why?" Agent Davies chimed in gently. "Would the money for a house in Ohio need to be routed through a holding company in Delaware?" His question was quiet, but it landed like a physical blow. It was the exact same question I had pushed down in the sterile silence of the bank 5 months ago. The question I had allowed my son to brush away with a confident smile and a wave of technical jargon. "He said it was to expedite the process," I whispered. Agent Riley's face was unreadable. "Stature Holdings Group is a shell corporation, Mrs. Miller. It has no assets, no employees, and no real estate holdings. What it does have is a direct link to a federal wire fraud investigation spanning 12 states." The room tilted. The hum of the refrigerator suddenly sounded like a roar. "Fraud? No, you don't understand." "My son, Mark wouldn't." I trailed off, looking from one stony face to the other. "This is a mistake. My son bought a house. They're planning to move in next month. We can find no record of a property purchase by your son, Mark Miller, in the state of Ohio or any surrounding state in the last year, Agent Riley stated, the words falling like stones. The $250,000 from your account was transferred out of Stature Holdings within hours of its arrival. It's gone. Gone. The word didn't make sense. It was just a sound. My savings, my future, the final gift from my husband, the foundation of my son's future. Gone? $250,000 doesn't just go gone. It was like telling me the sun had vanished from the sky. Mrs. Miller, Agent Riley's voice sharpened, pulling me back from the edge of a dark pit. Because the wire originated from an account in your name and is now linked to a significant interstate fraud and money laundering scheme, you are currently a person of interest in our investigation. Person of interest. The phrase echoed in the suddenly vast, cold space of my living room. It was a sterile, legal term that stripped me of everything I was: a mother, a widow, a neighbor, and replaced it with something ugly and criminal. The violets on the windowsill seemed to wilt before my eyes. The photos on the mantel felt like pictures of a stranger's family. My world, the one I had so carefully and lovingly tended for 62 years, had just shattered into a million unrecognizable pieces. To understand how I ended up facing down the federal government, you have to understand the love I have for my son. You have to see him not as the handcuffed man in a news report, but as the boy who used to build Lego castles on my living room floor. You have to see him as the man he was, or the man I believed he was, just 6 short months before my world was set on fire. It was a Sunday. In the before time, Sundays were my favorite day. The house would fill with the smell of my lemon herb roast chicken, the one Mark always requested, and the sound of his laughter would chase the quiet out of the corners. This Sunday was no different. Mark and his fiancée, Jessica, had arrived right on time, their arms full of flowers for me and a bottle of wine for the table. "Mom, this smells incredible," Mark said, kissing my cheek as he stole a piece of roasted potato from the pan. His smile was the same one he'd had since he was 5 years old, a little crooked, a lot of charm. Jessica, beautiful and bright, wrapped me in a hug. "Honestly, Susan, you have to teach me your secret. My chickens always come out so dry." She was the daughter I'd always wanted, easy to talk to, with a warmth that felt genuine. We sat around the old oak dining table, the one Tom and I had bought at an antique fair 30 years ago. The light from the setting sun streamed through the window, catching the wine in our glasses. Everything was perfect. It was a portrait of a happy family, a moment so pure I wish I could have framed it and lived inside it forever. "So," I said, after we'd all had our fill, "how is the great house hunt going? Any luck since we last spoke?" Jessica let out a theatrical sigh and took a sip of wine. "Oh, Susan, it's a jungle out there. It's not like it was when you and Tom bought this place, is it?" I smiled, remembering. "Goodness, no. We were the only offer. The realtor called us the next day and that was that. We moved in a month later." "If only," Mark laughed, shaking his head. "Now, it's more like a feeding frenzy. We went to an open house last weekend in Powell, a cute little brick ranch, nothing fancy. There must have been 50 other couples there. The realtor was basically taking bids on the front lawn. It's like trying to win an auction for a piece of history," Jessica added, her expression serious. "You're not just making an offer, you're writing a personal letter to the sellers, telling them about your dreams for a family, hoping they pick you out of a pile of 20 other letters." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We just want what you and Tom had. A place with a little yard for a dog, a good school district for later." She trailed off, sharing a meaningful look with Mark. And there it was. The unspoken promise. Grandchildren. The word hung in the air, shimmering with possibility. It was my deepest desire, a dream I held close to my heart. To see Mark become a father, to hold his child in my arms in the home he had built for his family, it was the future I had been praying for. "We found one, actually," Mark said, his voice dropping a little, becoming more serious. "The one. It's perfect, Mom. 3 bedrooms, big backyard with an old oak tree that's just begging for a tire swing. It has a little sunroom that would be perfect for a nursery," Jessica added, her eyes shining. I felt my heart swell. "Oh, Mark, that's wonderful. So you're putting in an offer?" He hesitated, just for a second, and looked down at his plate. "We are." But the listing agent was very clear. In this market, offers with financing contingencies get pushed to the bottom of the pile. The sellers want cash, or at least a massive down payment, to know the buyer is serious and the deal won't fall through. He looked back up at me, his expression a mixture of determination and frustration. We just have to find a way to make our offer the strongest one they get. No. You'll figure it out, honey, I said, my voice filled with a confidence I felt deep in my bones. You always do. You're smart, you both work so hard. When you want something, you make it happen. Mark reached across the table and put his hand over mine and Jessica's. His hand was so much bigger now, but I could still see the shape of the little boy's hand that used to clutch mine so tightly. Thanks, Mom. That means a lot. We won't give up. This is too important. It's not a vitter livel sivd in Carmen my life, Sim. We raised our glasses, the crystal chiming softly in the warm evening air. We toasted to the future, to the perfect house with the old oak tree, and to the family that would one day fill it. Looking at my son's hopeful face, I felt an overwhelming wave of love and pride. I knew, in that moment, that there was nothing in the world I wouldn't do to help him make that beautiful dream a reality. It was more than a house. It was the continuation of our family, the start of the next chapter, and I was going to make sure he had the best start imaginable. The phone call that sealed my fate came 3 days after that perfect Sunday dinner. I was in the kitchen, humming along to the radio and paying bills, the afternoon light slanting across the linoleum floor. When the phone rang and I saw Mark's picture flash on the screen, I smiled, expecting good news. His first words crushed that hope instantly. "We lost it, Mom." His voice was hollow, stripped of all its usual confidence. It was the voice of the little boy who'd fallen off his bike and scraped his knee, the teenager who didn't make the varsity team. It was a voice I was biologically programmed to soothe. "Oh, Mark, honey, I'm so sorry," I said, sitting down heavily at the kitchen table. "What happened? I thought your offer was strong." "It was," he said, a bitter laugh catching in his throat. "It really was. We offered $30,000 over the asking price. We even waived the inspection contingency, which Jessica was terrified about. We did everything right." He paused, and I could hear him take a shaky breath. "The realtor called us an hour ago. She said 17 offers came in. 17. And ours wasn't even in the top 5. The winning bid was all cash, $500,000, no questions asked. They're probably signing the papers as we speak. 17 offers, all cash." The numbers felt unreal, like something from a different planet. When Tom and I bought our house, the idea of competing with even one other person was stressful, let alone a whole crowd. "That's just insane," I murmured, trying to process it. "Who has that kind of money just sitting around?" "That's the new reality, Mom. It's like we're bringing a knife to a gunfight. We have a good income, great credit, but we're competing against investment firms buying up whole neighborhoods and people who just sold their tech stocks. The realtor told us straight up, in this market, unless you can make a cash equivalent offer, you're just not a serious player, you're background noise." I could hear the despair in his voice, the sound of a dream dying. The house with the old oak tree and the sunroom for the nursery was slipping away, and my son was helpless to stop it. It was a feeling I couldn't stand. A mother is supposed to make things better, to fix what's broken. "There has to be something you can do," I said, my mind racing. "Another house? And have this happen all over again? Go through the ringer for 2 weeks just to be told we lost to another anonymous LLC with a suitcase full of cash? Jess is devastated. She won't even come out of the bedroom." He let out a long, weary sigh that seemed to travel through the phone and settle in my own chest. "I just don't know what to do. I feel like I'm failing her." Then came the calculated pause, the silence he let hang in the air, filled with all the things he wasn't saying. I knew my son. I knew his rhythms, his hesitations. This was the wind-up to the pitch. "There is one thing," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "But I can't. I can't even ask. It's too much. Forget I said anything." "Mark, don't be ridiculous," I said immediately, my protective instincts kicking into high gear. "You can ask me anything. Tell me. What is it?" He was quiet for another long moment. The realtor said that if a buyer can show they have the full purchase price available in liquid funds, even if they still intend to get a mortgage, they can make an offer that's treated like cash. It guarantees the sale. It lets you jump to the front of the line. I held my breath. And how much would you need to do that? The sellers are asking for $475. We have our down payment saved up, all of it. But to get into that top tier, to show them the full amount is secured, we would need another $250,000. $250,000. The number landed in the quiet kitchen with a deafening thud. It was the exact amount Tom's life insurance had paid out. The money I had carefully invested after selling our bigger family home, the money that was supposed to see me through the rest of my life. It was my safety net, my independence. I looked around my small, quiet kitchen. On the refrigerator was a picture of Mark at his college graduation, his arm around me, his face beaming with limitless potential. On the wall was a framed photo of Tom, his warm, kind eyes seeming to watch over me. This money wasn't just paper in a bank account. It was Tom's final act of love, his last gift to us. And what was it for, if not for this? To secure the future of the son he had adored. My decision was made before Mark even finished speaking. It wasn't a choice, not really. It was an inevitability. It was the culmination of a lifetime of motherhood. I have it, I said, my voice clear and steady. Mark, I want to do this. I'll transfer the money. The relief in his exhale was a hurricane. Mom, are you sure? I mean, that's everything. It's for your everything, I said, a profound sense of peace settling over me. It's for your house, and for Jessica, and for that tire swing in the backyard. This is what your father would have wanted. It's what I want. Thank you, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Mom, thank you. You have no idea what this means. You just made our whole future possible. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, the silence returning, but different now. It wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with purpose. I had done it. I had taken care of my son. I had given him the foundation for his life, just as his father and I had always planned. I felt a deep, abiding satisfaction. It was the best, most important investment I would ever make. The next morning I met Mark at the Huntington branch downtown, the one with the big marble columns out front that always made me feel a little underdressed. The air inside was cool and smelled of clean carpets and money. It was the kind of place that was supposed to feel secure, solid. But as I sat in the hard plastic chair waiting for Mark, a nervous flutter started in my chest. It felt like I was about to take a final exam I hadn't studied for. Mark breezed in 5 minutes later, looking like he owned the place in a crisp button-down shirt and a confident smile. He kissed my cheek and handed me a sleek leather folder. "Morning, Mom. You ready to make it happen?" "As I'll ever be," I said, trying to match his easygoing tone. We sat down with a teller named Linda, a pleasant woman with kind eyes and a nameplate that said she'd been a senior associate for 15 years. She seemed like someone who had seen it all. I hoped she couldn't see the tremor in my hands as I passed her my account details. "All right, Mrs. Miller," Linda said, her fingers tapping efficiently at her keyboard. "A wire transfer for $250,000. Can you please provide me with the recipient's information?" Mark opened his folder and slid a single professionally printed sheet of paper across the counter. "It's all right here," he said. Linda picked it up and her eyebrows knitted together for just a fraction of a second. I leaned forward to read it along with her. The recipient wasn't a title company or a law firm. It was a name that sounded cold and corporate. Stature Holdings Group, LLC. Beneath it was an address in Wilmington, Delaware, and a long string of account and routing numbers. A small, cold knot formed in my stomach. "Mark, honey," I whispered, trying not to let Linda hear the waver in my voice. "I thought this was for the house. Who is this company? Why isn't the name of a person or a bank?" I thought. Mark didn't even look at me. He kept his focus on Linda, his voice smooth and reassuring. "It's a real estate holding company, Mom. Our wealth advisor set it up for us. It's for tax purposes and liability protection. Standard practice for a purchase of this size." Linda looked up from her screen, her professional smile unwavering, but her eyes were sharp. "I see. And the address is in Delaware?" she asked. "That's right," Mark said. "Delaware has the most favorable corporate laws. It just makes the paperwork cleaner and streamlines the closing process. We can move the funds into the local escrow account from there in 24 hours." He said it all with such effortless authority, using words like liability and streamline as if he were ordering a coffee. But my internal alarm was ringing louder. Why Delaware? The house is in Ohio. Why does it need to be so complicated? Linda finished typing and swiveled her monitor toward me. "Okay, Mrs. Miller, I just need you to verify that all of this information is correct before we proceed. I also have to ask a few standard security questions for a transfer of this size. Are you being pressured by anyone to make this transfer today?" Her eyes met mine, and for a second I felt like she could see right through me, right to the sickening knot of doubt in my gut. I looked at Mark. He was smiling at me, a patient, loving smile that also carried a hint of, what? Impatience? Like I was holding up the class. "No, not at all," I said, my voice coming out thin. "This is a gift for my son." "And have you personally spoken with the recipient to verify these account details?" Linda pressed on, her tone still pleasant, but firm. "I'm the recipient," Mark cut in smoothly, placing his hand reassuringly on my arm. "Well, my holding company is—" "Linda, I assure you, my mother and I have discussed this at length. Our advisor at Morgan Stanley arranged everything. It's all perfectly above board." Morgan Stanley. He dropped the name like an anchor, and I could see even Linda's professional resolve waver for a second. It was a name that meant money, power, legitimacy. It was a name meant to end questions. But it didn't. Not for me. A new question just popped into my head. "Since when do you have an advisor at Morgan Stanley?" "I just need your final authorization on the keypad here, Mrs. Miller," Linda said, pushing the small device toward me. I looked at the screen. The numbers stared back at me. $250,000. The culmination of a lifetime of work, of Tom's foresight, of scraped knees and college tuition and wedding toasts. Everything I had. And I was about to send it to a nameless, faceless company in a state I'd never even visited, based on my son's confident-sounding words that I didn't truly understand. My hand hovered over the keypad. For one wild, breathless moment, I thought about saying no, about standing up and walking out of that cold, quiet bank. I could just say I didn't feel right about it. I could ask to speak to this mysterious advisor. I could protect myself. But then I looked at Mark's face, his eager, hopeful expression, the slight impatience in his eyes. To say no would be to question him, to accuse him. It would be an insult. It would shatter the perfect image of the loving mother who trusted her brilliant son. The shame of that possibility felt worse than the fear. My fingers trembled as I typed in my PIN and pressed the green Enter button. The machine whirred softly. A receipt printed. Linda stamped it with a loud, final thud and slid it across the counter. "The transfer is complete," she said. "The funds will be delivered within 2 to 3 hours." It was done. My safety net was gone. "You did it, Mom!" Mark's voice was electric with joy. He threw his arms around me, hugging me tightly right there in the middle of the bank. "Thank you. Thank you so much. You won't regret this, I promise." I hugged him back, forcing a smile onto my face as a wave of nausea washed over me. I felt the crisp slip of the receipt in my hand. As we walked out of the bank and into the bright, indifferent sunshine, Mark was already on his phone, presumably telling Jessica the good news. He was walking a few steps ahead of me, his future secured. I watched him go, and the small, sickening feeling I'd been trying to ignore all morning was no longer small. It was a cold, heavy stone in the pit of my stomach, and I had a terrible feeling that I had just paid for it with everything I owned. 2 weeks after the wire transfer, the cold stone in my stomach had almost dissolved, replaced by a nervous excitement. Then Mark called. "Mom, put on your Sunday best," he said, his voice buzzing with energy. "Jessica and I are taking you out tonight. Our offer was accepted. We're in escrow." The relief was so immense it almost brought me to my knees. It had worked. My sacrifice, my trust, it had all been worth it. "Oh, honey, that's the most wonderful news I've ever heard." I cried, tears of genuine joy blurring my vision. That evening, they took me to a restaurant downtown called the Guild House. It was the kind of place where the lights were dim, the wine list was thicker than a novel, and the waiters described the food in hushed, reverent tones. It felt a world away from my quiet life, a glimpse into the successful future I had just helped secure for my son. "A toast," Mark said, raising his glass of champagne, the tiny bubbles catching the light. "To the most generous, trusting, and supportive mother in the world. We literally could not have done this without you. This house, our future, it's all because of you." Jessica beamed, her eyes sparkling. "To Susan," she chimed in, clinking her glass against mine. "We can't wait for you to come over for the first Sunday dinner in the new house. We've already picked out a spot for your grandkids' high chair." I felt a blush of pure happiness creep up my neck. This was it. This was the dream. "I'm just so happy for you both," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "So, now that it's official, you have to tell me everything. Can I see the listing photos again? What's the address? I want to drive by tomorrow and see the oak tree for myself." A strange, almost imperceptible shift occurred in their body language. Mark's smile remained, but it became a little tighter at the edges. Jessica picked up her cloth napkin and began folding it into a perfect square. "Well, Mom," Mark began, swirling the champagne in his glass, "we were talking about that and we kind of have a fun idea. We want it to be a surprise." Jessica jumped in, her voice a little too bright. "A big reveal. We want you to see it for the first time when we get the keys in our hands. We have so many plans for a few small cosmetic fixes, a new coat of paint, and we want your first impression to be of the finished, perfect home." I blinked. "A surprise? But I'm dying to see it. It's not a birthday present, it's a house. Can't you just text me the Zillow link?" "It's more special this way, Susan, trust me," Jessica insisted, reaching out to pat my hand. "Think of it as our first gift to you in our new home, the experience of seeing it all done up." It didn't make any sense. Why would they be so secretive? What harm could there be in me seeing a picture or an address? But I was sitting in a fancy restaurant, drinking champagne, celebrating their victory. To push the issue felt ungrateful, churlish. I was the generous, trusting mother after all. So I forced a smile and let it go. "All right," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic. "A surprise it is. Just promise me you'll take lots of pictures during the renovations." "Of course, Mom," Mark said, his easy smile returning now that the danger had passed. The rest of the dinner was lovely, filled with talk of closing dates and mortgage rates and paint colors. But underneath it all, that cold little stone was back in my stomach, heavier than before. The real blow came a few days later. It was a Saturday night. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my iPad, looking at pictures of my friends' grandchildren. I followed Jessica on Instagram. I loved seeing her posts. They were always so full of life. A new one popped up at the top of my feed. It wasn't a picture of paint swatches or moving boxes. It was a series of glossy, sun-drenched photos from a place that looked like paradise. Jessica and Mark were standing in a sprawling vineyard, holding up glasses of deep red wine, their faces flushed with happiness. The next photo was of an elaborate charcuterie board at a restaurant overlooking rolling hills. The final one was them, arms around each other, in front of a sign that said, Napa Valley. The caption read, "A much-needed weekend getaway to celebrate our bright future. So excited for everything to come. Number Napa, number blessed, number future is bright." I stared at the screen, my thumb frozen over the image. My mind started racing, a frantic, panicked accounting that didn't add up. Why Napa? A trip to California's wine country, even for a weekend, costs thousands of dollars. Why were they taking lavish vacations when they supposedly had to scrape together every last penny for their house? Why did they need my entire life savings if they had money for this? I clicked on Jessica's profile and looked at the date. The post was from the previous weekend, the weekend they were supposedly meeting with contractors and signing preliminary papers. The weekend they were too busy for Sunday dinner. The questions kept coming, each one more sickening than the last. Why would you post this publicly if your finances were so tight? Why celebrate so extravagantly before the house was even officially yours? And the final terrible question that had been whispering at the edges of my mind ever since I'd walked out of that bank. Why does it feel like I'm the only one who made a sacrifice? I looked at their smiling faces on the screen. They looked happy, carefree, and successful. They looked like a couple with a very bright future indeed. And for the first time, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, I realized their bright future and my own might be two very different things. The picture they were painting for the world and the one they had painted for me were not the same, and I had a terrible feeling that I had paid for the canvas, the paint, and the gilded frame for a masterpiece of a lie. Sleep didn't come that night, or the night after. The image of Mark and Jessica, smiling in the California sun, was burned onto the back of my eyelids. It wasn't just the trip. It was the casual, public display of a life that didn't match the desperate story I'd been sold. The lie was sloppy, it was arrogant, and it made me feel like a fool. The cold stone of dread in my stomach was now a burning coal of suspicion. For 2 days, I wrestled with it, trying to convince myself I was overreacting, that there was a logical explanation. But my intuition, the maternal sixth sense I had ignored in the bank, was screaming at me now. It was telling me to dig. So I did. I sat down at my desk with my iPad, the same one I used for recipes and video calls with my sister. It felt strange to be using it for this, like I was a detective in my own life. I started with the Instagram post. I zoomed in on the picture of them in the vineyard. In the background, a beautifully carved wooden sign was partially visible. I could just make out the words, Domaine Carneros. I typed it into Google. A spectacular winery, the search results told me, famous for its sparkling wine and chateau, in Napa, California. It was a dead end for the house, but it was the first piece of hard evidence. This wasn't just a weekend getaway, it was an expensive, cross-country trip. While I was at home, worriedly checking my now empty bank account, they were living a life of luxury on the other side of the country. Why? The question throbbed in my mind. Why would they need my money so desperately if they could afford this? I pushed the thought aside. The trip was a symptom. The house was the disease. I had to find the house. I closed the browser and sat back, forcing myself to think. Mark had been vague about the location, always using general terms like north of the city. But there was one conversation, weeks ago, where he'd mentioned a specific town. He'd said they were looking in Dublin because the schools were the best in the state. Just in case, he'd added with a wink. It was a start. Then I tried to conjure an image of the house itself. He'd only shown it to me once, a quick flash of his phone screen before he tucked it away. Don't want to jinx it, he'd said. But I remembered details. My mind is good with details. I remembered a stone facade, dark gray and elegant. I remembered a cheerful, bright blue front door. And I remembered the price range he'd mentioned when he first called me in his feigned despair. My fingers trembled as I opened the Zillow app. It felt like a betrayal, spying on my own son. But the need to know was stronger than my guilt. I typed Dublin, Ohio into the search bar. I set the filters. Price, $450,000 to $550,000. Bedrooms, 3 or more. I hit apply. 112 homes appeared on the screen. My heart sank. This was impossible. It was a needle in a haystack. I started scrolling, my eyes scanning the tiny thumbnail images, looking for gray stone and a speck of blue. One by one, I dismissed them. Brown brick, white siding, tan stucco, red door, black door. No. My hope began to fade. I felt a wave of shame. What was I even doing? I was a foolish old woman, inventing conspiracies because my son had taken a vacation. I was about to close the app when my thumb swiped past another row of houses and stopped. There it was. I would have known it anywhere. The elegant gray stone, the perfectly manicured lawn, and the door, a bright, welcoming robin's egg blue. My breath caught in my throat. I tapped on the image. It expanded to fill the screen, crisp and clear. It was the house, the exact one. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold the iPad steady. I scrolled through the gallery of photos, my heart pounding against my ribs. There was the gourmet kitchen they'd dream of cooking in, the master bedroom with the big windows, and the last picture, a sprawling backyard dominated by a magnificent ancient oak tree, the tire swing tree. I felt a dizzying mix of relief and terror. I had found it. I wasn't crazy, but the worst part was yet to come. I scrolled back to the top of the listing, my eyes searching for the one piece of data that would tell me everything. And I found it. Next to the price, in bold, unforgiving letters, were the words, "For sale." Not sale pending, not under contract, not sold. Active, for sale. My blood ran cold. I frantically scrolled down the page, past the beautiful photos and the cheerful description about its unbeatable charm. I was looking for the listing history, the digital footprint of the sale, and there it was, a clinical timeline of shattered dreams. Listed on the market, 81 days ago. Price reduction, 22 days ago. There was no record of an offer being accepted, no mention of it ever going into escrow. The house had been sitting there, untouched, for almost 3 months. It had never been theirs. The celebration dinner, the talk of closing dates and renovations, the toast to our future, every single word had been a lie. I leaned back in my chair, the iPad heavy in my lap. The silence of my house was absolute. There was no room for doubt anymore, no space for excuses or explanations. The proof was right there in front of me, displayed in the cold, hard data of a real estate website. My son had taken my life savings for a house he never bought. The lie wasn't just a secret trip to Napa. The lie was everything. And it was so much bigger, so much darker, than I could ever have possibly imagined. I spent an entire day staring at the Zillow listing, the web page a glowing testament to my own foolishness. The anger came first, a white-hot rage that made my hands shake. Then came the grief, a deep, hollow ache for the son I thought I had. By the next morning, both had settled into a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to get answers. I called him. My voice was eerily calm. "Mark, honey, I baked that cinnamon coffee cake you love. Can you swing by on your way home from work?" He agreed easily, his voice cheerful, oblivious. He thought he was coming for cake. He was walking into an ambush. He arrived just after 6, loosening his tie as he walked through the door, smiling. "Smells amazing in here, Mom. Flas Sovers. Forget the cake, Mark," I said, my voice flat. I was sitting at the dining room table, my iPad in front of me, the Zillow listing displayed on the screen. "We need to talk." His smile faltered. He saw my expression, saw the iPad, and a flicker of something panic crossed his face before he smoothed it over. "What's wrong? You look pale." "I saw Jessica's Instagram," I began, my voice as steady as a surgeon's hand. "The pictures from Napa were lovely. And then I got curious about the house. The one in Dublin, the one with the blue door." I turned the iPad so the screen faced him. His eyes darted to the image, and I saw his throat work as he swallowed. "It's still for sale, Mark," I said, the words dropping like stones into the quiet room. "The listing is active. It was never sold. It was never in escrow. It was never yours." I looked him directly in the eye, giving him no place to hide. "I want you to tell me where my money is." "Chap it." For a moment, he just stood there, his face a blank mask. I thought he would deny it, that he would invent another lie. Instead, he did something far more effective. He crumbled. His shoulders slumped, the confident young executive disappearing, replaced by a lost little boy. He sank into the chair opposite me and buried his face in his hands, his body racked with a silent, theatrical sob. It was a performance, I know that now. But at that moment, it was devastatingly convincing. "You're right," he choked out, his voice muffled by his hands. "Mom, you're right. We didn't get the house. I'm so sorry." I waited, my heart a block of ice. This was only the first part of the lie. He finally looked up, his eyes red and swimming with what looked like genuine tears. "But it's not what you think. I was trying to do something. For you. For us." He took a shaky breath. "The money isn't gone. It's just tied up." "Tied up where, Mark?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "A friend of mine from college. He works in finance now. He used to be at Goldman Sachs. He told me about this incredible opportunity, a short-term crypto investment. He said the word crypto like it was some magical incantation. Mom, he showed me the returns. It was basically guaranteed. It's like a high-yield savings account on steroids. The plan was simple. I was going to put your money in for 30 days, double it, and then we'd have enough to buy the house with cash, and I could give you your entire $250,000 back, plus another $50,000 for your trouble. It was supposed to be a surprise. My gift to you, for everything you've done." He was spinning a new fantasy, a more complex one. He was painting himself not as a thief, but as a misguided hero, a financial Robin Hood who was trying to help his poor old mother. "So you gambled my life savings," I said, the words tasting like poison. "No," he insisted, leaning forward, his eyes pleading. "It wasn't a gamble. It was a sure thing. But there was a market fluctuation, a delay. The funds are frozen, just for a little while. My partner said we just have to wait it out, another couple of weeks at most. I'll get it all back, Mom. I promise. I can fix this." He saw the disbelief in my face, the cold anger that his performance hadn't yet managed to melt. So he played his final, cruelest card. His face crumpled again, this time with a raw, desperate fear that felt terrifyingly real. "Jessica doesn't know," he whispered, the words barely audible. "She thinks the money is safely in escrow. She's picking out furniture, for God's sake. She's planning our whole life in that house." The tears were streaming down his face now. "If she finds out I did this, that I risked everything, she'll leave me. I know she will. She'll walk out that door and I'll never see her again." He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. It was cold and clammy. "Mom, please," he begged, his voice breaking. "I'm begging you, don't tell her. You'll ruin my life. Everything we've built, it'll all be gone. Just give me a little more time, a few more weeks. I can get the money back before she ever has to know. Please, Mom, don't destroy my life." He wasn't just asking for my silence, he was asking for my complicity. He was making me a co-conspirator in his new lie. He had taken my money, and now he was taking my voice, too. He was leveraging my love for him, my fear of his unhappiness, my deepest maternal instinct to protect him from pain, and turning it into a cage. And I, a woman who had come into that room armed with the truth and righteous anger, let him do it. The mother in me won out over the victim. The thought of my son, alone and abandoned, his life in ruins, was more than I could bear. "All right, Mark," I said, the words feeling like a betrayal of myself. "I won't tell her. Not yet." He collapsed back in his chair, a wave of pure relief washing over his face. "Thank you," he breathed. "Thank you, Mom. I'll fix it. I swear to you, I'll fix it." He left 10 minutes later, taking a slice of coffee cake with him for the road, wrapped in foil. He left a broken son who had made a terrible mistake. I watched him go from the window, and I knew, with a certainty that made me sick to my stomach, that I had just been played by a master. I had walked into that room with the truth, and I was now trapped inside a lie far more dangerous than the first. The walls of my living room seemed to close in on me after Mark left. The lie he'd told was a poison gas, odorless and invisible, filling up every corner of the life I had known. For months, I lived inside that poison, breathing it in, telling myself that my son was just a victim of a bad decision, that he was working to fix it. I waited for the phone call that would tell me the money was safe. That call never came. Instead, the knock on the door came, and my quiet suburban living room was replaced by this. A small, gray, windowless room that smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. The only furniture was a heavy metal table and 3 chairs. I was in one. Agent Riley and Agent Davies were in the other 2. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed a single, monotonous note. This is where the story always was, I realized. My cozy home was just a stage set. This room was the reality. "Let's go back to the beginning, Mrs. Miller," Agent Riley said, opening a thick file on the table between us. The sound of the metal rings snapping open was like a gunshot in the silence. "Let's talk about the house. In Munning." "I know there was no house," I said, my voice a dry rasp. "My son explained. He explained that he invested the money." Riley cut in, not unkindly, but with an authority that left no room for argument. "In a short-term crypto deal, the story he told you when you confronted him. We know. We've heard it before." I looked at him, confused. "You have!" This time it was Agent Davies who spoke, his voice calm and measured. "Ma'am, we understand. That's the story he gave you. It's a very common story. In fact, it's the one recruiters in these schemes are trained to tell their families if they start asking questions. It's part of the playbook. Reframe the theft as a high-risk investment, frame the motive as love, and frame the outcome as a mistake that can be fixed with just a little more time and silence. Every word was a perfectly aimed blow, dismantling the last rickety structure of hope I had been clinging to. My son's tearful, desperate confession wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a tactic. "What are you talking about?" I whispered. "What scheme?" Agent Riley slid a document across the table. It was a flowchart, a complex web of boxes and arrows. Stature Holdings Group was a shell corporation, Mrs. Miller, but it wasn't for a crypto fund. It was the central account for a nationwide Ponzi scheme. He saw the blank look on my face. "Think of it like a house of cards," he explained, using his hands. "The organizers at the top promise huge, fast returns. They find recruiters. Those recruiters bring in new investors, like you. The money from the new investors is used to pay fake profits to the early investors. It makes the whole thing look real, successful. But there's no actual investment. There's no product. The entire operation is funded by an ever-growing base of new victims. As long as new money is coming in, the cards stay up. Your $250,000 wasn't invested. It was used to pay off someone who got in before you, and to pay a commission to the person who brought you in." The person who brought me in. The blood drained from my face as the implication hit me. "No," I said. "Mark was a victim too. He put the money in. He was waiting for a return." "Your son never invested a dime," Agent Riley said, his voice hardening for the first time. He slid another paper across the table. It was a bank statement for Stature Holdings Group. He had highlighted a line item, "Incoming wire, S. Miller, $250,000, and then, 2 days later, a series of outgoing transfers. One, for $25,000, was wired directly to Mark's personal checking account. The subject line read, "Recruitment Commission. Thanks for watching. In the City with a Speared Live." I stared at the paper, the black and white text swimming before my eyes. Commission. He was paid. He was paid for taking my money. "Your son wasn't a victim, Mrs. Miller," Riley continued, his voice relentless. "He was a key player. He was a recruiter. His job was to find new investors, to bring fresh money into the scheme to keep it from collapsing. The trip to Napa? That was a bonus for hitting a recruitment target. He brought in over $500,000 from 5 different people in 3 months." Agent Davies pushed another set of papers toward me. They were copies of emails, text messages, transcripts. "He brought in his college roommate from Dayton," Davies said softly. "His fiancée's uncle in Cincinnati, an elderly couple from his old neighborhood. He sold them all the same dream, guaranteed returns, a bright future." He paused. "He sold them you, Mrs. Miller. He used your story. He told them his own mother, a widow, had invested her life savings because the opportunity was just that good. And there it was, the bottom, the absolute, lightless, airless bottom of the abyss. My son hadn't just stolen from me, he had weaponized my love. He had taken my sacrifice and mounted it on a flagpole to lure in other innocent people. My trust was his marketing tool. My generosity was his proof of concept. The coffee cake I'd baked him, the unconditional love I'd given him his whole life, it was all just ammunition for his crimes. The agents kept talking, their voices a distant drone. They spoke of wire fraud, conspiracy, of the years he would likely face in a federal prison. They told me that because my name was on the initial transfer, I was legally entangled in the web he had spun, but I could barely hear them. All I could see was his face in my living room, tears streaming down his cheeks as he begged me to protect him. It wasn't a son asking for his mother's help. It was a predator, ensuring his victim would remain silent. And I had done exactly as he'd asked. I don't remember the drive home from the federal building. I remember closing the front door behind me and leaning against it, the silence of the house rushing in to fill the void the agent's words had left behind. My home, my sanctuary, now felt like the scene of a 30-year-long crime, and I had been both the victim and an unwitting accomplice. For the next 24 hours, I was a ghost in my own life. I drifted from room to room, looking at everything through new eyes. The photos on the mantel were the first hurdle. There was Mark, age 8, grinning with a missing front tooth. Mark, 16, looking impossibly handsome in his football uniform. Mark, 22, his arm around me at his college graduation, his eyes full of what I had always believed was limitless promise. I looked at that smiling young man in the cap and gown, and I felt a grief so profound it was a physical weight, a pressure in my chest that made it hard to breathe. I wasn't just mourning the loss of my money. I was mourning the loss of my son. The Mark in those pictures, the one I had raised and loved and sacrificed everything for, he didn't exist. He had never existed. Late that night, I found myself standing at the door to his old bedroom. I hadn't changed a thing since he'd moved out. His bookshelf was still lined with the fantasy novels he'd loved. His high school debate team trophy sat on his desk. It felt like a museum of a life, and I was its lonely, foolish curator. I sat on the edge of his bed, the quilt my own mother had made years ago cool beneath my hands, and I finally let the questions come. Not the questions about the money, but the deeper, more painful ones. Why didn't I see this? The question echoed in the silent room. And the answer came back, not in a single flash, but in a slow, agonizing flood of memories. I remembered the time in 7th grade when he broke Mrs. Henderson's window playing baseball, and I'd given him the money to pay for it, telling him we didn't need to bother his father with the details. I remembered in high school, when he was caught cheating on a history paper, how I'd gone to the principal and argued that the pressure on students was just too high, that it was a momentary lapse in judgment, not a flaw in his character. I had fixed it. And I remembered his first year of college, when he'd overdrawn his bank account by $500. My husband, Tom, had been furious. I can still hear his voice, firm but not unkind, echoing in this very house. "You can't always be his safety net, Susie," he'd said, his hand on my shoulder. "One day he's going to fall, and he needs to know how to get back up on his own. Love isn't about saving them from every mistake. It's about letting them learn from them." I hadn't listened. I had secretly deposited the money into Mark's account the next day. I had told myself I was being a loving mother, a supportive mother, but looking back now, from the wreckage of my life, I could see with blinding clarity what I had really been. I had been an enabler. I had spent his entire life diligently pulling up the weeds of his consequences, so he'd never had to learn the shape of their roots. I had taught him, through my actions, that a charming smile and a well-performed apology could fix anything. I had taught him that my love was a blank check, a get-out-of-jail-free card. Is it any wonder he grew into a man who saw my life savings as just another problem his mother could be counted on to solve? I looked across the room at a picture of Tom and me on our wedding day, sitting on top of his dresser. I could almost hear his gentle, pragmatic voice cutting through my grief. "So what are you going to do now, Susie? Are you going to fix this for him too?" And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The grief, the shame, the helplessness, it didn't disappear, but it receded, making way for something new, a cold, hard clarity. The most loving thing I had ever done for my son was to give him my savings. The most loving thing I could do for him now was to make sure he faced the consequences of stealing it. My love for him hadn't died, but it had finally grown up. It was no longer a blind instinct to protect. It was a fierce, painful desire for him to face the truth, and for me to reclaim my own. The boy in the pictures was gone. It was time for the woman in the mirror to finally stand up. I walked out of his room and didn't look back. I went to the kitchen, to the small table where I paid my bills, and found the crisp business card Agent Riley had left me. My hand was perfectly steady as I picked up the phone and dialed. The phone rang twice before he answered. "Riley." End quote. "Agent Riley," I said, and I was amazed at how clear and strong my own voice sounded. "This is Susan Miller." There was a brief pause on the other end. "Mrs. Miller, I'm glad you called." "I'm sure you are," I said. "I've made a decision. I am no longer a person of interest. I am your witness. I'm ready to tell you everything." The next day, I sat at my own kitchen table with Agent Riley and Agent Davies. The dynamic had shifted completely. I wasn't the terrified subject of an investigation anymore. I was a partner in it. They had brought coffee and donuts, a ridiculously normal gesture in the most abnormal situation of my life, but it was a clear signal. We were on the same side now. "The problem we're facing, Mrs. Miller," Riley began, spreading a series of documents on my table, is that the men at the top of this scheme are ghosts. They use layers of shell corporations, encrypted messaging apps, burner phones. We can follow the money, but we can't put a face to the name on the account. They're insulated, Davies added. Mark and the other recruiters, they were the buffer, the public-facing part of the scam, the people who got their hands dirty. In my son's confession to me, I started, my voice steady. The fake one. He mentioned a partner, a friend from college who used to work at Goldman Sachs. Riley's pen was already moving. Did he give you a name? A first name. Steve, I said. I saw a flicker of disappointment in their eyes. 1,000 men were named Steve, but then I closed my eyes and let my mind drift back, replaying the conversation, searching for the details my panicked brain had glossed over. Wait, I said, my eyes snapping open. He didn't just say Steve, he said Stevie. His friend Stevie from the fraternity, the one who always drove the fancy new Audi every semester. Mark was always so impressed by him. The two agents exchanged a look. Stevie, from the fraternity, at Ohio State? Riley asked. Yes, I confirmed. He graduated a year ahead of Mark. That's a lead, Davies said, a new energy in his voice, a nickname and a context. We can work with that. It felt good, to be useful, to be doing something other than drowning in my own grief. It's funny the things a mother remembers. It's like my brain is a filing cabinet of my son's entire life, and I never learned how to throw anything away. All the little stories, the names of friends, the triumphs and complaints, they were all filed away, collecting dust, waiting for a purpose. What about travel? Riley asked. We know about the Napa trip. Were there others? Any business trips he seemed particularly excited or secretive about? I thought back to the months leading up to the wire transfer. It was a blur of Sunday dinners and normal conversations. But one detail snagged in my memory. He went to a conference, I said slowly, pulling the memory into focus. About a month before everything. He said it was in Austin, Texas, a fintech conference, whatever that is. I only remember because he complained that the hotel barbecue was terrible and that nothing could beat Ohio brisket. Riley was writing furiously now. Austin, Texas, 4 weeks before the transfer. That's another piece of the puzzle, Mrs. Miller. A big one. These groups often hold recruitment seminars disguised as industry conferences. We talked for another hour, me pulling dusty, forgotten scraps from the filing cabinet of my mind and them piecing them together into a mosaic of my son's secret life. As they were packing up their papers, a final, long-shot question came to me. It was connected to a memory of Mark, frustrated with his computer, years ago. Agent Riley, I said, when Mark was in college, he had a laptop that was always crashing. For his graduation, we bought him a new one, a MacBook. I remember asking him what to do with the old one. Both agents stopped what they were doing and looked at me. He said it was worthless, that the hard drive was shot, but that I should just stick it in the attic, in case he ever needed to recover his old term papers. I looked from Riley to Davies. I haven't been up there in years, but I'm almost certain it's still there. You have never seen two men move so fast. 10 minutes later, I was pointing them toward the pull-down ladder to the attic. The air that drifted down was thick with the smell of dust and old paper and cedar. Agent Davies, who was younger, climbed up and disappeared into the gloom. We heard him coughing, moving boxes around. Then, his voice echoed down. Found it, a silver Dell laptop, under a pile of yearbooks. I want no taint. He handed it down to Riley, who held it like it was a holy relic. It was covered in a thick layer of dust, an ancient-looking thing with faded fraternity stickers on the lid. It looked like junk. Is it useful? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Mrs. Miller, Riley said, his eyes gleaming with a kind of professional excitement that was both thrilling and terrifying. Deleting a file isn't like shredding a document. It's more like tearing up the card in a library's card catalog. With the right tools, our forensics team can usually find the book still sitting on the shelf. He held up the dusty laptop. Your son thought this was worthless. He got arrogant. But there could be years of emails, messages, spreadsheets, a complete blueprint of their entire operation right here. This isn't just a lead. This could be the whole case. He carefully placed the laptop into a padded evidence bag. My son's whole life, his real life, was in that bag. I had just handed them the key to his prison cell. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, and the most necessary. My intimate knowledge of my son's life, the memories I had cherished as a mother, the things I had held on to as acts of love, they had just been weaponized, not for vengeance, but for justice. The old laptop was a silent, digital bomb, and when the FBI's forensic team was finished with it, the explosion tore through my son's carefully constructed world. It was a Tuesday, almost a year to the day since the agents had first knocked on my door, when Agent Riley called me. His voice was calm, professional. "Turn on the news, Mrs. Miller. Any channel, it's happening." I did as he said. And there, on my television screen, was a live report from downtown Columbus. The headline crawling across the bottom of the screen read, "Federal agents bust multi-state EIGHTMILLION Ponzi scheme." The reporter, a serious-looking woman I'd seen 100 times, was speaking into her microphone. Authorities say the scheme targeted over 50 victims across the Midwest, many of whom were elderly, convincing them to invest their life savings into a fraudulent crypto fund. They showed footage of federal agents carrying boxes of evidence out of a sleek, glass-fronted office building that I'd never seen before. They showed the mugshot of a man they called the ringleader, the infamous Stevie from the fraternity, whose real name was Stephen Porter. And then they showed the B-roll footage of the other arrests. And I saw him. It wasn't the confident man in the expensive restaurant or the tearful performer in my living room. It was just Mark. Looking pale and thin in a wrinkled hoodie, his hands cuffed behind his back, his eyes wide with a terror I'd never seen before. He didn't look like a criminal mastermind. He looked like a child who had just realized the game was over. They put him in the back of an unmarked car, and it pulled away from the curb, and he was gone. I didn't cry. I just felt empty, numb. The fallout was swift. Jessica called me that afternoon, her voice a shrill, unrecognizable shriek of rage and accusation before the line went dead. 2 days later, their wedding website was password protected. A week after that, it was gone completely. Her Instagram, once a glossy catalog of a perfect life, was wiped clean. She had vanished, a ghost exorcised by the harsh light of the truth. I spent the next few weeks in a strange limbo, waiting. Then, a thick envelope with a return address from the United States Attorney's Office arrived. My hands trembled as I opened it. The language was dense, full of legal terms, but the message was clear. It was a formal notification. Due to my substantial cooperation in the investigation, my status as a person of interest was officially terminated. I was legally and publicly cleared of any wrongdoing. The final paragraph designated me as a registered victim of the crimes, and it outlined the long, slow process of asset seizure and the potential for partial financial restitution. I read the letter 3 times, then set it down on the kitchen table. This was my vindication. The proof, on official government letterhead, that I was not a criminal, that I was not a fool, that I was a victim. But as I stared at the words, I felt no sense of triumph. There's no victory in watching your son's life implode. There is no celebration in being right, when being right means your child is a predator. There was just a profound, aching sadness for the boy I had lost, and the quiet, bone-deep relief of the truth finally seeing the light of day. Justice had been served. It wasn't my job to seek vengeance. It was my job to start healing. The following spring, I did something I hadn't done in 40 years. I drove to the campus of Columbus State Community College. The air was full of the smell of new grass and the sounds of young people laughing, their backpacks slung over their shoulders, their faces full of a future they took for granted. I felt ancient, invisible, a relic from a different time. I almost turned around and went home a dozen times. But I thought of Tom's voice, telling me to let our son learn from his falls, and I realized I had to learn to get up from my own. I found the registrar's office and walked up to the counter. The woman who helped me was kind, patient. I looked at the course catalog, the pages filled with endless possibilities, history, art, science. And my eyes landed on one, Bus 1101, Introduction to Small Business Management. Connects to where you've too hard now. A week later, I was walking back across that same campus, a new textbook clutched in my hand and a student ID card in my wallet. I found the right classroom, a bright, sunlit room with rows of tables. I took a deep breath, the air feeling clean and new, and I walked inside. I chose a seat by the window and opened up a fresh, empty notebook. The professor started talking, and I picked up my pen. I was no longer a mother defined by my sacrifice. I was no longer a victim defined by my trauma. In that classroom, under the fluorescent lights, I was simply Susan, a student, a beginner. And for the first time in a very long time, I had a blank page in front of me, ready to write a story that was entirely my own. My name is Susan Miller, and for most of my life, I measured my worth by how much of myself I could give away. I thought that was what a good mother did. We build our nests, feather them with our own ambitions and dreams, and then encourage our children to take whatever they need to build nests of their own, until there's nothing left but an empty frame. We call it sacrifice. We call it love, and for years I believed it was the purest expression of both. I was wrong. I used to think of my love as a safety net, one I wove with my own hands, designed to catch my son whenever he might fall. What I didn't realize is that a safety net, held for too long, can easily become a cage. It prevents the person inside from ever learning how to stand on their own 2 feet, and it traps the person holding it into a lifetime of looking down, waiting for the next fall. My son lived in that cage, and I was its willing, loving warden. I thought I was protecting him from the world, but all I was really doing was protecting him from himself. The truth is, the story of this betrayal didn't begin with a wire transfer. It began with 1,000 small moments, 1,000 little rescues, 1,000 times I chose to smooth things over instead of letting him face the music. Society loves the image of the silent, self-sacrificing mother. We're praised for it, but there is a fine, dangerous line between selfless love and self-erasure. There's a difference between giving your child the world and letting them take it from you. We teach them to be strong and independent, but so often, we forget that we need to be their primary example. If there is one thing I wish I could go back and tell that trusting woman in the bank, it would be this: listen to yourself. That small, sickening feeling, the one that twists in your gut when something doesn't feel right, that isn't you being cynical or difficult. That is the oldest, wisest part of you screaming a warning. That is your own voice trying to protect you. I spent a lifetime teaching my son to find his voice, and in the process, I forgot to listen to my own. Don't ever let someone else's confidence be louder than your own intuition. I still have days where the grief is heavy. I have to consciously separate the son I loved from the man he became. I visit him sometimes. The conversations are hard, stilted. There are no easy answers, no movie magic moments of forgiveness. There is only the slow, difficult work of accepting the truth. He is serving his time, and in a way, so am I serving time for a lifetime of misplaced trust. But my story is not over. It isn't a tragedy. The government is working, through the slow gears of the justice system, to recover some of the money he and his partners stole. Maybe one day, I'll see a fraction of it. Maybe not. But I've realized something profound. I'm not waiting for it. My future is no longer a number in a bank account. It's the business plan I'm writing for my class. It's the A I got on my first marketing exam. It's the quiet satisfaction of knowing that, for the first time, I am building something that no one can ever take away from me. I am building a life that is entirely my own. For years I thought my value was in what I gave away. Now I know it's in what I build for myself. The shame of being a victim is a powerful silencer. It's what criminals like my son count on. They count on you being too embarrassed, too heartbroken, to ever tell anyone what happened. Please, do not give them that power. Your story deserves to be heard. Your pain deserves to be seen. And you deserve justice. If you or someone you know has been the victim of a financial crime, if someone you trust has taken advantage of you, there is help. I've put a link to the official FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center and the Federal Trade Commission's reporting website in the description below. It is the first, hardest, and most important step you can take toward getting your voice back. Don't stay silent.